There have been few moments that have changed the world forever. The burning of the library at Alexandria, man stepping foot on the moon, and, of course, Elon Musk buying Twitter. Now, sadly, not everything that happens in history is a banger, unfortunately. On the morning of July 1945, a top-secret test would change the world and humanity's ability to harness the power of the gods forever. For a split second, a portion of the Earth's atmosphere in the plasma ball that you see before you reached 10,000 times the temperature of the surface of the sun. In fact, before this test, some scientists thought that there was a small chance the bomb could set the Earth's atmosphere ablaze. This test was named Trinity. There are long debates on why the test was named Trinity in the first place, but there is one thing for certain. It was humanity's first experience of nuclear explosive power. And for those working on the project, the Trinity test was seen as a massive success. So much so that only 29 days after the Trinity test, President Harry S. Truman greenlit the dropping of Little Boy, an atomic bomb, on Hiroshima. The Trinity test used the implosion method. The implosion method, put extremely briefly, is when you take an unstable heavy element, such as plutonium-239, and wrap it in a bunch of conventional chemical explosives, such as TNT or gunpowder. I personally like to think of it as a spicy Ferrero Rocher chocolate. When the conventional explosive wrapping of the bomb was ignited, the shockwaves moved inward, compressing the core of plutonium in the middle, causing it to go supercritical. This supercriticality causes the plutonium atoms to release some of the power in the explosion you see before you. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were so destructive, they killed an estimated 380,000 people. Obviously, these estimates range. The casualty number is so hard to pin down, really, is because the explosions alone were not the only killer. For weeks, months, and years, people continued to perish due to their exposure to the extreme radiation that was released when the nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan. Now, thankfully, after these two bombs were dropped, Japan surrendered and World War II had come to an end, and no more need for nuclear bombs to be dropped. For many at the time, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were their introduction to nuclear energy. Till this day, the general public is weary of nuclear energy, even though it is one of the safest methods of energy generation. Now, before I start today's video, I just want to say thank you to everyone who watches my videos. Seriously, I got so much love and encouragement from you all, I'm at a loss for words. Hey guys, Cole here from the editing desk, and originally I wanted this nuclear video script to be like one whole video. But if I edited it all together, the video would turn out to be an absurd 63 minutes long. And I don't want you guys to have to sit through that. And also, partly, I edit, make, and produce all my videos, so I want to keep my sanity. So with that being said, I'm going to break this video up into two parts. This video, part one, will ask, why was this even planned? Where I cover the most absurd historical use cases for nuclear energy or radiation. Part two, a video that'll be coming at a later date, will ask the question, wait, is this actually useful? In that video, I will cover some of the best and most useful ways we have used the power of nuclear energy or radiation to positively benefit humanity. Anyway, back to the video. So let's ask the question, why was this even planned? In 1957, there was an umbrella project created called Operation Plowshare. This project's purpose was to somehow find a way to use some of our nuclear bombs that we created during World War II for peaceful construction purposes. As one could have guessed, Operation Plowshare housed some pretty insane projects. In fact, one proposed and tested example was nuking the Earth's crust and then listening for reflecting vibrations to get a clearer picture of what the Earth's crust was made out of. Kind of like an ultrasound when you're pregnant, but instead of you finding a baby, all you find is minerals and oil. Which, to be honest, is nice to find something deep inside you that can give you money, because normally if there's something inside you, it can be really expensive and life-sucking. Like cancer. Or a child. And in the most American way, as if we could not get more greedy for oil, There was a test called Project Gas Buggy, where oil companies originally wanted to bomb tight natural gas reservoirs to stimulate the flow of natural gas. This would be done in an attempt to extract every last drop we could of liquefied natural gas out of the ground. Which sounds great and all because, yay, more natural gas. But then you start to realize, oh, maybe this is not such a good idea, because now when you turn on your stove to cook macaroni and cheese, your kitchen's now just slightly more radioactive. Most of these nuclear projects proposed inside of Operation Plowshare were scrapped and never acted upon. But one of the canceled plans caught my eye more than any other. This is the Suez Canal. And before you ask anything, yes, this is the canal you're thinking about. The canal that got the boat stuck in it, and is maybe one of the biggest fuck-ups that not only had many memes made about it, but the shit parking job could be seen literally from space. Due to heavy winds and air, this one mess-up dropped the world trade by an estimated 12%, or cost the world $9 billion per day. Now, with that being said, the Suez Canal is not owned or operated by the United States. It's currently controlled by Egypt. And the United States does not like that at all. Because if the United States cannot control the world trade, is it really the free market? Knowing this, the United States saw that it had two options. One, start a war and take over the Suez Canal, which is not really the best option because that could cause World War III, and no one really wants to get into that. So they had option 2, which was the more sensible plan, and that plan was to nuke Israel 520 times to create their own canal and hope that the possible canal formed isn't so radioactive it gives the crew on the boats rectal cancer. In 1963, there was a memorandum by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and their objective plan was to excavate a canal through the Negev Desert in Israel to open an American Israel-owned canal. What was their method? Utilizing 522 megaton nuclear explosions. I feel it pertinent to point out that only one of the 520 bombs that was proposed to be used in the Negev Desert plan is 133 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. The project was originally estimated to cost $575 million, or $5 billion in 2021 money. Which, in theory, makes economical sense, as that would move a lot of dirt very quickly and for cheap. Also, don't really think they thought through how much radiation would flow out of the newly formed Negev Canal and go to irradiate both the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and from there on to the world. Okay, so building water canals were out of the use case. So what else could we use nuclear bombs for? Turns out there's actually another similar use case in the United States when the Atomic Energy Commission wanted to nuke California. The project name was Project Carryall, and it was proposed in 1963 by the Atomic Energy Commission and California Division of Highways. And they wanted to use around 22 to 23 nuclear bombs to cut, or literally blow through, the Bristol Mountains in the Mojave Desert. And this was so that they could build a portion of Interstate 40 and potentially build a rail line. Project Carryall was eventually scrapped, and not only because of the lack of public support, but also because the dust cloud from the detonation was projected to be around 7 miles wide and could have displaced entire towns and cities for up to 4 days after the explosions, due to the dust cloud settling downwind. The United States had many peaceful nuclear explosion projects, and too many to name in this video. But if you're interested in seeing the over 30 states and 156 proposed projects from Project Plowshare in detail, I recommend the research report by the Desert Research Institute. It is very in-depth and just fascinating. And if you're just as big of a nerd as I am, the link is in the description below. The Americans were not the only country to try and find use cases for their nuclear stockpile. The Soviet Union had also a program in which they were finding ways to use nuclear explosions for peaceful uses. They were just a lot more carefree on the consequences of nuclear fallout or explosions. The Soviets' counterpart for Operation Plowshare was nuclear explosions for the national economy. This is a man-made lake. Now, inherently, there is nothing really crazy about a man-made lake. In fact, 53,000 of the lakes in the United States alone are man-made. Lake Chagan is special though, not because of the use case, but how it is made. On January 15th in 1965, the Soviet Union, and the most nuclear bombed place in the world, decided to test yet another nuclear bomb. The Soviets placed a 140 kiloton nuclear bomb, or 9 Hiroshimas, 584 feet deep in the dried up Chagan riverbed. The detonation that followed was so large, it left a crater of 400 feet wide and about 100 feet deep in a matter of seconds. With some back of the napkin math that I did, that is roughly 3.461 million tons of earth moved in a blink of an eye. Or, if you want the American units, that is 576,833 African elephants in the time that it takes you to sneeze. Because of the way Lake Chagan was created, it was named Atomic Lake. What fascinates me about the Lake Chagan test is not so much the explosion itself, but the dust from the explosion. It just goes to show how interconnected our entire planet really is. An estimated 20% of the radioactive material produced from the creation of Lake Chagan was launched into the upper atmosphere and was detected as far as Japan. That is 4,095 kilometers away, which, again, if you're American, that is 181,472 Patrick Mahomeses. Patrick Mahomes? Mahomeses? What's the plural for Patrick Mahomes? As of today, Lake Chagan is still 100 times above the safe radioactive water levels. And in the most Soviet thing ever, the people of Kazakhstan hear the warnings of not to go into the lake and fish there, and yet they still just go out, catch a fish, and fry it up to eat. This one fact has led me to wonder how radioactive a fish would need to be before people would just choose not to eat it. Like, would you stop eating it when it's glowing or when it has a third eye? I think it's very important to point this out here. Please do not go eat a fish from a nuclear lake. The fish that live in the lake eat radioactive molecules, and then their cells then take those radioactive molecules and use them to build the fish. The fish is made from radioactive elements of that lake. So that means you will quite literally could be eating radioactive material. Atomic Lake is not the last of the nuclear Soviet shenanigans either. It's time I tell you the sad story of Russia's abandoned nuclear lighthouses. In the early 1950s, the Soviet Union had a major problem. Their northern massive coastline was being heavily utilized for trade and its military during the Cold War, and it was extremely dangerous to travel by, especially during the winter and summer months. This was because sailors could run ashore due to fog being so thick you could barely see your best friend's asshole right in front of you in the summer, or you could just get lost in the ice cap and freeze to death during the winter. Now, remember, this was a time before GPS, so Soviet sailors needed a safe and reliable way to sail these waters without fear of running ashore. To solve this problem, the Soviet Union decided to build many lighthouses along the northern coast. Building these lighthouses themselves was not the hard part, interestingly. The biggest hurdle was finding a way to cheaply and reliably power all of these lighthouses that would cover 10,000 miles of the coastline. Often these lighthouses were going to be unreachable during the winter months because they would just be trapped or snowed in by the Soviet winter. So if a power line were to go down in any way, there's a very real probability that it could not be fixed for months, or at least until maintenance crews could get to it. This is where the radioisotope thermoelectric generator comes into play. What an RTG is, put very simply, is an energy generation device with a very radioactive isotope of a certain element in the middle. The radioactive isotope that is used for the fuel source is very unstable. In order for the radioactive isotope to get to a stable state, it has to undergo something called radioactive decay. During this decay, the radioisotope either emits an alpha or beta particle, alongside a little bit of heat energy. This heat energy released during decay keeps the radioisotope ingot extremely hot. For instance, the radioactive fuel source used to power the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecrafts used plutonium-238. Now, this core had an injunction temperature of 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit. Using the heat from this radioactive material, engineers are able to convert a portion of the energy into usable electricity via the Seebeck effect. Now, I'm not going to go into what the Seebeck effect is, but just know that using a cold side and putting a heat source to it, we can generate little electric currents to be used for electricity. These RTG reactors are reliable and can theoretically last for decades, depending on the half-life of the isotope that is chosen. RTG reactors, if maintenanced, are a safe, smart, and reliable option to have as a generator for a long and remote energy production source. Huge asterisk there. These RTGs are safe technology as long as they're maintenance and used properly. This is where the Soviets got it wrong. It was their blatant misuse and lack of care in these reactors. You'll see this going forward to be a common thing with the Soviets. Hey guys, Cole from the editing desk again. I wanted to give credit and a shout out to Andy McClone. He has an amazing video deep dive on the entirety of the nuclear lighthouse project. His video is just amazing. It covers the history, culture, development, and use case for the nuclear RTGs in the Soviet Union. So please, go watch his video on it. He did an amazing job. And if you're watching my video, I really think you would like his. The link is in the video description down below. Hey, seriously, what are you doing? Pause this video and go watch Andy's and come back. I promise, you will love it. This is a Soviet Union Beta M RTG. It is roughly about the size of a full-size bed and weighs quite literally a metric ton. Again, you know, if you're American, 1.4 Asian elephants. And there were a lot of them. Approximately 2,500 RTGs were powering the lighthouses and radio beacons across the northern Soviet border. This is Swan Lake, and this is what the Soviet Union state-run television channels would play during times of political unrest. This is where the nuclear RTG's existence start to go to shit. The incompetence of the Soviet Union nuclear agencies paired with massive economic and government downturn led to gross mistreatment of the lighthouse nuclear RTGs. Some of these RTGs were just left out in the open with no one tending to them for repairs or general safety. To show you how badly these reactors were contained and cared for, some of them were just placed in a wooded shack, and these shacks have just rotted away, leaving the RTG exposed to the elements and any unknowing human walking by. Negligence, an economic downturn, and collapse of the Soviet Union led to these orphan reactors being scrapped for metal parts by unknowing looters so they could be sold for metal. With the RTGs being looted for spare parts, this led to orphan radioactive fuel sources being scattered randomly across the Soviet Union, radiating whoever came near, innocent or not. Till this day, not all Beta M generators are accounted for. Some estimates say between 2 to 8 generators are just still missing, and we have no idea where they're at. This means there are 8 missing RTGs that are currently unaccounted for, and this makes them orphaned nuclear sources. This is the country of Georgia, a beautiful country with breathtaking scenery. Unfortunately, this is where the famous Leah radiological accident happened. On December 2nd, 2001, 3 men in Georgia were out looking for firewood for the winter. While they were looking for firewood, it began to snow harder and harder. The men then decided to spend the night in the forest as it was getting too dark to turn back, as the hike back would be difficult in the dark. This is when the 3 men stumbled across 2 cylinders that were so warm they looked to be untouched by the snow. In fact, the canisters were so warm that within a 3 feet radius around these 2 canisters, the ground was so hot that it was devoid of snow and actually was steaming. Grabbing these 2 magical canisters and then finding a campsite for the night, the 3 men huddled around the radioactive RTG fuel sources for warmth. Now, although these men were kept warm, they were sleeping up to a foot away from a heavily radioactive cesium-90 radio source for up to 12 hours. To put this in perspective of how much radiation these men received, the recovery team consisted of 25 men, and each man during the recovery phase was only allowed to be exposed to the cylinders for 40 seconds. And immediately after the 40 seconds, they were supposed to drop what they were doing and sprint away. What followed over the coming weeks for the 3 men was brutal pain. Fortunately, 2 of the victims made it out alive and were discharged after repeated surgeries and therapies. The third, 893 days after his exposure, with constant intensive medical care, antibiotics, many surgeries to repair the decaying tissue and skin grafts, he sadly succumbed to his injuries. Look, their injuries were so bad, I cannot show them to you without being demonetized on YouTube. But I am a medical student myself, and I'm fascinated by the different ailments of the human body. And if you're like me and interested in the devastating effects of acute radiation sickness, you can find everything you want and more in the IAEA research publication linked in the description below. It has an entire medical case breakdown for all 3 men, full detailed breakdown of the recovery operation, logistics, and any unforeseen lessons found. It's an utterly fascinating paper for anyone, even if you're a bit squeamish when it comes to decaying flesh. I hope that you understand that these men were more than a statistic. They had people who loved them and both missed them till this day. I truly hope that we can learn from this storm of mistakes and figure out how we can do and will do better moving forward as we march to a more nuclear-powered future. Ending off the video on a high note, I just want to say our nuclear future is looking incredibly bright. And there have been so many incredible things we have done with nuclear energy. So part 2 of the nuclear video series will be a way more upbeat video. I promise. Anyway, that is it for part 1, and I promise part 2 will be coming out after my next video. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you have anything you would like to say in the comments below, I would love to hear it. I want to know how I could get better, and just know your thoughts on what other absurd things we've done with nuclear energy. I'm thankful for each and one of you who watch my videos. You're incredible. I love you all. Bye.